Welcome to EOTalks, Eastern Oregon's very own talk show, only here on EOAlive.
Hey Eastern Oregon, thank you for joining us with this version of EOTalks, and it's my pleasure to have with me Congressman Cliff Bentz from Ontario. I was going to say, Mr. Bentz goes to Washington. Yeah. But hey, glad to have you with us today.
Glad to be here.
Yeah,
Very glad to be here.
Yeah, appreciate you taking the time to stop through and kind of catch us up. Now, Congress just recessed. I mean, you guys have been busy, and you're finally done. Is that
Well, we're done for a week and a half.
Okay.
And then we go back for 3 more weeks.
Okay.
Then we have the August recess.
Okay.
So that'll be for a month and 2 weeks. And so it sounds like you get a month off. It's not quite true.
Yeah.
You get a month to come back to your district and travel about it and remind people who you are. So
Yeah,
but this was a very welcome break. We've been in D.C. for a very long time, it seems. And we had to go back during our previous week break to vote for the debt ceiling. And so it seems like I've been in D.C. forever, and if you look at my little farm, it looks like it.
like it. Well, and your assistant who called me and arranged this, he said that you kept telling him, like, I have weeds that I need to cut.
They're not weeds, they're trees.
They're trees, yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah, and I told him, like, doesn't he have people for that? You know, I mean, you got people in Washington.
Yeah, no, I talked to my wife. I said, hey, would you get out there, honey? And she goes, no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, hey, thanks for taking the time to spend with us today. And it's always fun. This conversation is a little bit unplugged and unhinged, and so it's kind of hard to know where it's going to go. But let's start. What's new in Washington? Is there anything fun or exciting? You mentioned that some of the Congress people are wearing tennis shoes. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Yes, several folks have decided that they wanted to form a sneaker caucus, sneakers, and start a movement toward everybody wearing tennis shoes with their suits and that kind of thing. It seems odd because you kind of wonder where this is going to lead. Is there going to be a cut-off caucus? Is there going to be everybody wear a big hat caucus? I mean, you kind of wonder, and there's a reason that we try to dress up and look serious about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think the idea of doing that is a very good one, because it kind of should lead to people recognizing we're about pretty serious stuff. And so dressing seriously seemed a part of it. Others don't agree with me, and we'll see where this goes, but it lends itself to an awful lot of interesting conversations. The sneaker caucus.
I'll bet. So, explain to me the purpose of a caucus. I mean, yeah.
Right. Well, there's 435 people there.
Right.
And so to get anything done, you need friends, and so you form a group. You call the caucus if you want to get something done, because otherwise you don't get much done by yourself.
Right.
So in fact, you don't get anything done by yourself there.
Right.
So although this time around, given the incredibly small majority that we have, we only have a four vote edge over the Democrats, we Republicans. So it doesn't take too many people to slow the whole thing down, and you've been seeing that happen, by the way. But the caucuses are numerous. There are all kinds of caucuses you can join, different groups. I don't know how many, but dozens, hundreds, I don't really know. I belong to probably 10 different groups. And the one, I was asked if I would be the head of the veterinarian caucus, because I'm married to a veterinarian.
Right.
And I said, well, I guess, but don't you have someone that's close? But the veterinarian, Kurt Schrader from Oregon, lost his race, and so he had been the head of that caucus. I asked, when I was asked if I'd be the head of it, I said, well, how many times do you meet a year? And they said, maybe once. So it's not a very active caucus. Another caucus, like the Freedom Caucus, for example, is a very, very aggressive caucus. 32 members out of Republicans out of 222 of us, meets once a week, if not more often, and has a set of bylaws, has a set of rules, has a set of standards. And in fact, I heard just a couple of days ago that they were meeting to perhaps remove Marjorie Taylor Greene from their group, because apparently there are members of the Freedom Caucus that think She's not done what the rest of them want members to do. So that's how a caucus, they're very, very strict in how they operate, because remember, you only have power if you're a group, and you only have power as a group if you all act together.
Right.
So that's most caucuses aren't that driven to move forward. Most caucuses, there's the beer caucus, for example. You can imagine where it meets.
Yeah.
There's the middle of the road caucuses. There's the Main Street caucus. There's all kinds.
Okay.
And each one, most of the people that join are going in the same direction. One thing you'll see, by the way, you'll see people say, well, Congressman Bentz is the member of X caucus, and X caucus has decided it's going to go a certain direction. Therefore, Mr. Bentz must be going in that direction.
Right.
That is not true. You might belong to any number of caucuses. You may or may not agree with what the leadership of that caucus decides to do. So you have to be kind of careful. Some people don't join any caucus for fear of being accused of going in a direction they don't agree with. So I would just say anybody that hears that I'm going in direction of a certain caucus should give me a call and see if it's true.
Because if you're not at the table, you're not a part of the conversation, even if it's not a caucus that you totally buy into.
That's absolutely true. And if your caucus has, for example, the Republican Study Committee, that caucus has, I want to say, 130 members. So the odds of all 130 people agreeing on anything, very, very slim. And that group comes out with different positions of big position papers and things like that. Well, they may have voted on it. Do they report the fact that a number of people voted against it but were outvoted? Generally not. And so you have a choice. You can just quit being a member of the caucus when you disagree, or you can say, well, I'll have to explain it when asked.
Yeah. So are there caucuses that have members from both parties?
No.
No.
Well, forgive me.
Okay.
The Problem Solvers Caucus has members from both parties. It's a very small caucus.
Yeah.
I'm not joking. And that's because the sadly, and I mean this truly, the compromise is not necessarily a positive term.
Right.
Many people say, well, if you're compromising, you're not fighting for us.
Right.
And so if you happen to belong to a group that has more than just Republicans in it, you're going to have to constantly be justifying why you're consorting with the enemy. Now, I belong to the prayer group that meets once a week, the prayer breakfast, and it's made up of both Republicans and Democrats. That's about the only group that I know of. It's not a caucus; it's a prayer group.
Right.
And it's met for many, many years. And so I'm happy to be a part of it. It's one of the few places where you can actually meet Democrats.
Right.
Yeah, on common ground.
Wow.
But that's unusual.
So you and I have been acquaintances for a while now, and when you were a state representative and now you're in Washington, and the whole, I mean, how is it going? I mean, how's it going from the standpoint of exactly what you're talking about? I mean, were you hoping to be able to work and solve problems, and this wall of not working with each other you've kind of run into? I mean, kind of give me your assessment personally of how that journey has gone for you.
Well, I want to tell everyone that I'm extraordinarily happy to be in Washington, D.C. in Congress. And it's because it's the first time in my political career I've ever been in the majority. And so it may be a very small majority, but still.
Right.
And so that's what's led me to be chair of the subcommittee on natural resources on water, wildlife, and fisheries. But for being in Washington, D.C., I wouldn't have had the opportunity to ask for and then hold the field hearing we just held in Richland, Washington on Monday of this week. That wouldn't have happened but for my being in Washington. That hearing was attended by 300 or 400 people. Hugely important to try to keep our 4 lower Snake River dams. But for my being in Washington, D.C., that would not have happened.
Right.
And we would not have had the opportunity to talk to the Corps of Engineers at that hearing in front of all those people and have it up on C-SPAN, so between 200,000 and 2 million people have a chance to watch us in action. So now, were any Democrats there? No. Even though they were invited, they chose not to attend. But it gives you an opportunity, whether you have their company or not, to move the needle on public opinion, which is how you make progress there.
Right.
And so, as far as what I thought when I went there, I was pretty sure that there wouldn't be much dealing with my Democrat colleagues there, because I watch the news and social media and everything else, and you can see Democrats and Republicans being driven further and further apart.
Right.
And so trying to find something that everybody agrees on is extraordinarily difficult. And so we do it every once in a while, because we have to. It's in certain times. Because it's a split government, right? We Republicans control 1/3 of it. We have the House, Democrats have the Senate, and Democrats have the White House. So you have to work out something if you're going to get the job, the work of the nation done.
Yeah.
But is it easy? No, very, very challenging. And that's, we had the same thing in Salem.
Right.
And we ended up walking out.
Right.
And I think it was one of the first walkouts in 20 years.
Right.
And now it seems like it's happening a lot more. I think that's a reflection of overreach by the Democrats in Salem. And by that I mean the type of things that they're doing simply are inappropriate in many ways, certainly for people in Eastern Oregon and Southern Oregon that I represent. And until you see a party that's willing to dial back, the Democrats dial back some of the stuff that they're doing, you're going to see the minority walk out.
Yeah.
And so there's the balance that I think might have at one time been in Salem seems to have disappeared, and the majority seems to be riding roughshod over the minority. That will not end well.
Yeah.
It will not. And so the challenge is how do you address making sure in this day of polarization that you somehow figure out how to balance your approach.
So you covered a number of things that I want to go back and talk about, but let's talk about the dams first.
Sure.
So for the people that don't know or haven't been following, what is it that's been tried? People are actually, there's a group that actually wants to remove the dam. Talk about what they're wanting to do and the effect that would have on us all. And, educate us on this whole topic, if you would.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to do that. The 4 lower Snake River dams were put in the early 1960s, and they generate about 1,000 megawatts of power. That's enough to provide electricity for about 1/3 of Washington state.
Wow.
And it's about 11 or 12% of the total power generated by the Bonneville Power Administration. The dams are owned by the federal government, and the power they generate is sold through the Bonneville Power Administration. The power in this area, Oregon Trail Electric, that's Bonneville Power coming from partially from those dams. The environmentalists have decided that those dams are the reason that salmon runs have diminished and are not recovering. And early on, in the 60s perhaps, and even earlier, before the advent of high quality fish passage, they may have had an argument. But now, each of those dams has amazing fish passage facilities. We just toured them on Monday, and the amount of fish making it through the dam coming downstream is around 97 to 98%. That's how many make it through the transfer facilities unscathed. If you listen to the environmentalists, you would think that those dams are each fish blenders, and the fish that come out are all mangled, and that is not true. And we went and actually looked at the fish there's viewing spots in the dam, watching them swim through. These are the bigger fish going upstream. And so there's the misleading statements are amazing. I just want to say one thing about these dams. Hugely, hugely, hugely important to the power generation portfolio of the Northwest.
Right.
It's quote, only 1,000 megawatts. That's an astounding amount of power.
Right.
Again, 1/3 of Washington state. But at certain times when you need what they call peak power, and you need every turbine inside the dams being operated, you can raise that number to about 2,800 megawatts. And that's what saved California during their most recent hugely damaging heat event. They
Right.
did not have enough power to run the air conditioners in all of California. So they called upon us in the Northwest to send power down there. And thank goodness we had the ability to do so.
Yeah.
Because people were dying of heat stroke and other things. So these dams are extraordinarily important for reasons far beyond their mere nameplate capacity. Right. So we need to have the dams. The issue can be broken down into, are the dams harming the fish? And the short answer is no. The amount of damage at one time may have been higher, but now it's negligible. The second issue is, where are the fish actually being damaged? And here's a super interesting fact. If you look at the Columbia River, and the Snake River runs into it, and these 4 dams on the Snake are just above the confluence of the 2 rivers. And they're all in Washington State, those 4 dams. If you look at the mortality of a smolt, a small little fish that was hatched from salmon eggs and moves down through the system. The mortality when it reaches the lowest dam on the Columbia River, which is Bonneville, is about 50%, 50. So if you had 100 fish at the head of the rivers, and you measured how many were still alive at Bonneville, there'd be about half, 50 fish. Now, how many were killed by the dams? Very, very, very few. Most are killed by birds and by other predators coming as they come down. So can't blame the dams for that 50% loss. But here's the key. The 50% that are left, and under our hypothetical is 50 fish, go out into the ocean.
Yeah.
They spend 4 years there. And then they swim back. Out of the 50 fish, how many swim back? The answer is 1.
Wow.
Yeah, 1. Out of the 100, it'd be 2%, but out of the 50, it'd be just 1.
Wow.
So as a percentage of the 50 that went in, it's crazy the amount of mortality in the ocean. And so our point on Monday was to say, look, we've done all we can to make these dams neutral when it comes to the survival of the fish. And we've done a lot. And now that's not the problem. The problem is in the ocean and also with predators along the route as these fish move to the sea. And so what is National Marine Fisheries, who was a witness in the hearing, doing about the ocean and the ocean conditions? Or is it spending all of BPA's money, $750 million a year of your dollars when you pay your electrical bill? Right here, this light shining on us right now. How many of those dollars are going to help the fish in the ocean, as opposed to being focused on already solved problems in the river? And the answer is not very much is going to the ocean. Why the emphasis on the dams when they're doing so much good for so many people? Yeah. Anyway, I'm sorry for talking so long, but there's the background.
And you didn't even mention the irrigation part of
or the navigation.
Yeah,
the fact that those dams allow barges to go all the way to Lewiston, Idaho, load up with wheat, huge amounts of it, and take it down the river to markets across the world, around the world. And if those dams were gone, then you got to put all that wheat on trains or on trucks.
Right.
And the amount of you have to add another train track, and how many thousands of trucks? Literally.
Yeah.
The roads could not stand the additional truck traffic if we did away with those barges.
Well, and then that all of that activity increases the carbon footprint of that stuff. I mean, so if
unbelievably.
Right. So, okay. And I followed this a little bit, and I was like, it's such an outrageous idea.
It sure is.
Because a lot of people don't understand that us in the Northwest, we are super green because of that hydro power that we have benefit.
Absolutely true.
To us. Yeah. We are incredibly fortunate. We're fortunate to be able to have that, and we're fortunate that that electricity is very green.
So what people don't also understand is that the water running through those 4 dams runs through them all the time. That's called firm power. That's called reliable power.
Right.
That's called power that's available anytime you need it. That's not true with solar.
Right.
That's not true with wind.
Right.
And so that 1,000 megawatts of firm, reliable power is worth 3 times that amount of power generated by a solar farm or windmills. It's because it's always there. So when you go to your light switch, they come on.
Yeah.
And so to say, well, we can just shift over to intermittent power, no, you can't, because we don't have batteries.
Right.
And so if you take out those dams, then suddenly you're losing an enormous amount of power as compared to the intermittent sources that would be the ones that you'd have to use. The amount that each person's electrical bill would increase if those dams went away is around between $120 and $150 a year. Each ratepayer would pay that much more if those dams went away.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what? Why would we do this?
Right.
When the benefit for the fish would be extraordinarily modest.
Right.
I mean, modest. Because remember, where the real problem is in the ocean. Because if we get more fish through those dams,
Yeah.
they go to the ocean, and that's where the ones that we just added, the bad news.
Yeah.
So why aren't our agencies focusing on the ocean?
Yeah. And why aren't they? I mean, what's your opinion?
Well,
of
my
why they-
opinion, so there's two huge reasons.
Okay.
The first one, in all probability, I don't know this for sure, but I think I'm right, that $700 billion, 700 and some odd billion, million a year, $750 million, that you as ratepayers are paying is being spent mostly on freshwater. Why? Because that's, I think, where it has to be spent. I don't think it can be spent in the ocean because it's ratepayers that are paying it, and why would they be saddled with the obligation of fixing the ocean? So it could be the money, and that what's happening is environmental organizations who make a living off that money in many ways, NGOs that obtain some of that money for grants and other things, are not enthusiastic about that money leaving freshwater and going to the oceans. That's one. The second one is, I think National Marine Fisheries realizes the ocean is incredibly difficult and challenging.
Right.
Where they can just look at the dam and go, oh, it's the dam's fault.
Right.
Look at that big dam, it's all its fault.
Right.
And politically, it's easy for organizations, as they've been doing recently, holding meetings, saying the dams are basically big fish blenders. Not true at all, period. Somebody take a look online or go up and look at the dams. They're doing that because it helps them raise money. It helps their narrative. They have a target to point at. If you're pointing at the ocean, it's much more difficult.
Right.
One of the things, by the way, when you're pointing at the ocean, you're pointing at Seattle. Why? Because raw sewage is going into Puget Sound from those cities along the ocean. And you say, how much? I don't know. Kathy McMorris Rogers, Congresswoman from Washington State, was on our panel 2 days ago, and she was the one raising this issue. Well, does NIMS want to start going after the city of Seattle? There's a target for you.
Right.
And what's it going to cost to try to fix that problem, or all of the other problems that we face in the ocean? But the challenge here is, let's figure out what it is that's going on out there that's making so few fish return.
Right. So, this brings up a really interesting question, though, because certainly humans impact the world that we live in some manner or another. And there are times that we have to make choices. I mean, that river back before the 60s without any dams might have been a perfect environment for salmon to get out. Or I mean, if we could roll the clock back 100 years, but the progress of humans has had a negative impact on the environment. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, I don't feel guilty about that. I want us to be a good steward of what it is that we do, but at the same time, I believe that the world is a benefit for humans, that we're at the top of the food chain. Now, So the question is, how are some of those hard questions made? How do you answer some of those hard questions? Because there is a time where, we do something, we have the benefit of electricity, which is green, which benefits the world, but at the same time that might have a negative impact on a specific species. As a Congress guy, how do you make those decisions, or how do you feel about that?
I think you've done a great job of asking the proper question. And if you look at the snail darter case, I don't know if you remember, it was way back, and it was one of the first times that the Endangered Species Act was called into play, and it involved a dam, I believe, back in the South. And they discovered, after they'd spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the dam, that it was going to affect negatively the snail darter. And they slowed down the construction of the dam, and the case went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court determined that, indeed, the exact question you ask, we have a dam negatively impacting a very, very small fish. And as a result, they changed the Endangered Species Act because they suddenly realized that man's activity is always going to have an impact.
Right.
So they went in and they changed the Endangered Species Act all those years ago to reduce, if you will, the standards that we apply when we're trying to balance these conflicting uses of that river or any river.
Right.
So instead of it being an absolutely no damage whatsoever, there has to be a lower standard. Otherwise, all of our economy would grind to a halt.
Right.
And so that issue has been addressed early in the evolution of the Endangered Species Act. I happen to think that we need to change the Endangered Species Act even more to get away from, I think, some lack of balance in it. The Klamath situation is a great example of all the water being taken away from the farmers and given to in-stream purposes. And I view that as being politically biased. Not that I want to leave the fish without water, but you can't take all the water away from everybody and to put it into a river and then have no benefit to the fish coming from it, because that's what's been happening.
Right.
So, but the Endangered Species Act is what's being used to accomplish that purpose. That there has to be more balance in these systems. There, absolutely. And I know many environmentalists hate that word balance because they want all of the water to go to a single species. What ended up happening in the Klamath, just to pursue your point, is that the water, when taken away from the farmers, dried out all the bird refuges. So now all the poor birds that were trying to make their way on the main flyways back and forth from the north-south had no place to land, except in a big, dusty, dry lake or marsh.
Yeah.
So I believe that those kinds of issues have to be addressed. We have bills that do that go in and say, hey, here's how we need to change this law so it's not as prohibitive of man's activities, because I think the Endangered Species Act has gone too far in the direction of unbalance when it comes to these issues. I want to mention one other thing. I went to China for 2 weeks, my wife and I did, on a legislative tour 11 years ago. China, I don't think, has the Endangered Species Act, and thus it has a lot fewer species.
Right.
If you're going to be capable of taking care of your species, you better have an economy that works really well, because it's really expensive.
Right.
And so when anybody is sitting there trying to figure out how to do this balance, they've got to be saying, now, wait a minute, who's paying for all of the bureaucrats that are doing the analyses? Who's paying? What is the miracle of our economy that allows us to be funding all of these studies? And so you can't come in and shut down your economy when you know that you're not then going to be able to do all of these good things for fish. That's why when you look at these dams, you go, no, something's wrong with the balance here. But your question is right. It's a constant battle between these issues, and in an adjustment up or down of the standards that we try to apply. A constant, and it's never going to be perfect,
right?
Because no one's ever going to agree. But I think we can all agree that we need an economy that works.
Right. So let's switch topics to something easy. Let's talk about Trump for a minute.
Sure.
So, and I don't even know how to dive into this. Maybe Where do you think the Republican Party is going? I mean, because that is a big question that a lot of people ask. Trump produces this storm of his own in whatever it is that he does, and part of that, and I guess part of this comes back to what I see in Congress too. So was a tremendous effort to get McCarthy as the Speaker of the House. And we talked a little bit about that offline. But I mean, clearly something is happening in the Republican Party that hasn't happened in the past. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we need to start with where I believe the Republican Party is in general. So
Okay.
I have 20 counties in Oregon, 20 counties, most of whom have central committees of Republicans. So I have a chance to go talk to them and find out what they're thinking about Trump and about other issues. But there is one common theme, and it's anger and it's frustration. And I think there's some fear there that our government has become unwieldy and out of control, and that no matter what you do, you're not going to make a difference. That there's just an awful lot of hot air and nothing happening except bad things. A constant drumbeat and trend towards socialism. You'll hear that over and over again, as recently as yesterday, where people are saying, look, we're scared to death that our country is being taken over and being driven toward socialism. And we need someone to stop that trend. And they'll say and they do say, there's no room for debate, there's no room for discussion, that we need to stop them. And they view former President Trump as capable of doing that. They view him as not being capable of being bought. They view him as perhaps flawed in many ways, but that at the end of the day, he'll do what's right to try to stop that trend. And they view him as someone who has experience in that space and is capable of slowing down this movement toward socialism. That's what I hear. I hear that over and over and over and over again. And it's not just here, because I travel now around the United States. I'm a member of the Western Caucus, and we travel to different places, and we get to talk to people all over, and that's what I hear. The truth of the matter is a little more complicated now that I'm back in D.C. and can see what happens for real. And there is zero doubt about the challenges that our enormous bureaucracy in the form of all of our government agencies, the challenge that they present. And a good example is watching what happened to Secretary Zinke when he took over the Department of the Interior. It was Secretary. And he lasted a short period of time and then had to resign. And the gentleman that took his place wrote a book, and it's called You Report to Me. And what happened was he went into the job after Zinke had been there, and he realized that this massive agency was really, really hard to change, because everybody had been in it, working there for years, and they had their ideas of what should happen. And they thought that the secretary was merely a guy passing through. You know, he'll be gone soon enough, and we're going to keep on doing it at the BLM level or at any of the other sub parts of the agency, just what they'd always been doing, and we'll just wait him out. Well, when he saw this, he had a decision to make, and he thought, I wonder who I ask. Who in this huge agency do I ask for direction? So he called President Trump, and he said, who do I ask for direction? And the president said, you report to me. And he instantly knew that meant he had license to approach all of these things the way he thought. And then if he made a mistake, he reported to the president. And so he began to take aggressive positions, including helping us down on the Klamath, to try to say to these agencies, look, this is how we're going to do it, and you people work for me and I report to the president.
Right.
Now that kind of direction is what I think people are looking for. They're asking for somebody who can step in and try to make a difference. And that's why yesterday having our hearing, or excuse me, day before yesterday having our hearing up there was so meaningful to me after all the years I've spent to try to get here.
Yeah.
Because suddenly we could cast a light on what I saw as agencies doing the wrong thing. And I could go into more detail what we already have. I'll just say I was so happy to have that opportunity to say, here's what the agencies are doing. It's wrong, and they need to change. And we made that very, very clear. And yay. Now, getting back to President Trump, former President Trump, there are a lot of people running for president right now, and there's a lot going on in his life right now. A lot. Much of it shouldn't. I think he's a target, and he's used to litigation. I think somebody said that he's been in 3,500 lawsuits in his life. My number may be low. I'm not sure.
Right.
So he's used to this space. But when you're a former president, as outspoken as he is, you're going to become a target.
Right.
And so a lot is going to happen as we go through this next year and a half. I went with Jim Jordan, who's a good friend now. He's chairman of Judiciary, to New York just a few months ago to hold a hearing on what Alvin Bragg, the DA up there, did to the president. I thought it was ridiculous and politically driven, and I think most people agree with me. And so we went up there actually to look at what Bragg should be doing, which is taking care of crime in New York.
Right.
And we had an excellent hearing. The Democrats at the committee meeting mentioned President Trump's name 38 times. We mentioned it once, and that was when Elise Stefanik, Republican from New York, said, "You Democrats have mentioned President Trump's name 38 times, and we've mentioned this once."
Right.
They tried to make it all about the president. We tried to make it all about crime. But the point is, Jim Jordan is doing his best to try to call out some of the bias that's in these agencies that are going after former President Trump.
So then, to kind of draw a string from where we started, so you feel like you're able to make a difference because, and that really was the question.
Yeah, it was.
Given the climate that you've learned in Washington, are you able to make a difference? Or you feel like, and you're able to make a difference because you're in the majority right now, and so then you've been able to hold these hearings on the dams.
Not just the dams, other hearings too.
Yeah.
But yes.
And that at least you're able to draw attention to some of the stuff that is happening, has maybe been kind of happening in the shadows, or people haven't been looking at.
So yes to your question. I will also say we have, as Republicans, in majority in the House, but in a minority in a split government.
Right.
Because we're 1/3 of the government. The Senate and the White House being democratically controlled. What we're able to do is, as a minority, because that's what we truly are in the three branches of government, we've been able to raise any number of issues and pass any number of bills that call out the frailties and missteps, blunders, if you will, by the president and by the Democrats. And that's the job of the minority. Your job is to make it clear to the American people what's going wrong and what could be done better. And we're doing that, whether it's on the border, whether it's on the crazy attempt to ban gas stoves, whether it's on water-related issues, whether it's on immigration, all of these issues we're able to step in. We just passed a bill saying that only biological girls could play girls' sports. And that was an attempt to try to say, look, competition is the foundation for sports, and you can't suddenly make it unfair by allowing biological males to play women's sports. It flies in the space of Title IX.
Right.
And so we're doing those kinds of things. Will those bills go any further than the floor of the House? Unlikely. But we're calling out these differences as loudly as we can, and I'm happy to have that opportunity.
Good. So the gridlock that's happening in Washington that we all know about and we're frustrated about, would term limits change any of that?
Well, I think the answer is it would make it worse.
Okay, yeah.
One thing I've learned, this is my third year there.
Right.
And that sounds like a long time, but I will tell you, when you're dealing with 434 other people,
Right.
the only way you get things done is by knowing who you work with.
Influence, making friends.
Right, yes.
Yeah.
And the only way you also get things done is by understanding how the system works. And it's a complicated system. And remember, you have to convince other people that you are right. And you have to know at what point you can actually get something done.
Right.
I was able to get an amendment into the border package that we passed in judiciary, as I'm a member of it, that calls out the need to reverse some of the Biden administration's additional baggage on H-2A visas, and that it was an important amendment. It passed, but of course it's only went to the floor and stopped. But I got that amendment in there, but that was because I knew the people on the committee.
Right.
I knew who to go talk to.
Yeah.
I knew what they were thinking, and so if you don't know those things, then you're not going to be able to get anything done. What will happen if you have term limits? It depends on how long they are.
Right, yeah.
One of the bills says 6 years. Well, I can guarantee you by the end of year 6, you're just finally figuring out what to do and how to do it and who to do it with. And then you leave.
Right.
So when the new person shows up, then
They're starting over.
Well, worse, you'll further the polarization because you'll drive people back into their groups, and you won't see you'll get less and less balance.
Right.
And now, do I want everybody to serve in Congress? Yes. If I had a wish tomorrow, I would say
It's like jury duty. You
gotta go.
Yeah.
And you have to get up at 3 in the morning and get to the airport and fly across the United States and change into a suit and go down and have 3 or 4 meetings and then go in and vote and then repeat and then please. And then try to put up with a whole bunch of people that, like I used to say, Congress is just like my family. I have 5 younger brothers and an older sister, and every one of them think they're right all the time. Every one of them, and if you disagree with them, then you're either naive or a communist. So that is Congress.
Right.
Everybody is sure they're right, and so I want everybody to have to go there and try to deal with that kind of a experienced political group. Why? Because it's really hard.
Yeah.
And we're trying to get things right. The longer we leave people there, the more people are going to know. I support term limits. I don't support 6-year term limits.
Right.
But the average certain length of service is 9 years.
Right.
So 9 years, that sounds about right. And I think what happens is people wear out and they leave. Yeah.
Well, and I think the public, this is my general assessment, they have problems with people that have been doing it for, it's their entire career.
If I may, my predecessor, Greg Walden, 22 years.
Yeah.
Now, there's a really good reason that in a small state with one Republican wants a Greg Walden.
Yeah.
Why? Because you want someone who's been there long enough to work his way up and have some power for a little bitty state with one Republican in it.
Right.
If you did every 6 years, you would never have any power.
Right.
You'd be there for 6 years doing what? Doing what? Well, you'd join the biggest group you could find, and you'd add one vote.
Right.
But you wouldn't know enough people. You wouldn't know where the levers of power are.
Right.
You would not be able to do the good things he did for this state.
Yeah.
Now, I think 22 years is quite a long time.
Yeah.
But boy, small states. Now Texas, it has an army of representatives, and so their continuity opportunities are far greater.
Yeah.
And so you can hand off the football, if you will, if you're in Texas.
Right.
Now I have one Republican that joined me, Lori Chavez Dreamer, who I'm very happy joined us, because now there's 2 of us. So at least we can have a caucus meeting. Yeah, but anyway, I'm just saying the small states term limits make less sense than big states.
Well, and I think part of it is the experience of Congress people also. You have been a successful lawyer, you've had a practice, you're a farmer. You have a lot of experience outside of this political thing that you're doing.
Correct.
Yeah.
A lot. Look at my age.
Right. But there are some people that's all they've ever done. All they've ever done is politics.
That is true. That is true. And I would say they're the lesser for it.
Yeah, okay.
Every day I am happy for my 30 years of full-time law practice.
Right.
Because it gives me such an opportunity to step into conversations and say, no, don't do that. or how about doing this?
Yeah.
Just the hearing on Monday, I was able to use things I learned trying cases as a lawyer in putting on a better hearing, a more successful hearing. So absolutely, having experience is good.
So what do you, let's just go back to Trump for just a minute. So, I mean, if you had a crystal ball, where do you think, is there anyone out there, in your opinion, who could unseat him as the potential Republican candidate, do you think?
So I don't know. He's hugely supported. I think the polls indicate that around 62% of Republicans, maybe, depends on the state, support former President Trump as the nominee. I'll tell you what's most interesting and most important to me. I want to win.
Right.
I do not want Joe Biden as president for another 4 years.
Yeah.
I do not. And so my goal here is to watch the people as they join the race for president, and then start trying to see who it is that can win.
Right.
This is I've supported President Trump in the past. I've voted for him. He's endorsed me. Can he win? That is the question. And I know that he thinks he can, but he has a lot, as I said earlier, going on in his life right now. A lot, and the prosecution being brought by the AG's office should be of grave concern to him, and I'm sure it is. But will that have an impact on his ability to serve as president? I don't know. Will it have an impact on his ability to be elected president? Yes, because we're talking about the swing voters in these really close elections. I don't want this to be a close election. I want to win, and that's because I think, indeed, that our country is facing some incredibly serious challenges. I don't think President Biden is up to it. I was very dissatisfied with the type of legislation he brought that's put us into this inflationary state that we're in now. We don't need that, and we need to slow down the spending. We need to protect Social Security and Medicare, and the only way we can do that is with thoughtful, careful work. And I do not think that President Biden's up for it. But this is just one little space. We can talk about national security. We could talk about the border. We could talk about all kinds of things. We need to have a Republican in the White House.
So, one final topic, the Supreme Court. What's your assessment? I mean, we've looked at the decisions, we've looked at the mix in the past. What is your thoughts on where the Supreme Court is right now? A lot of big decisions are probably going to come out this week.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the mix of that? And should they have term limits? Should they, I don't know, give me your thoughts on where you think that's at.
Well, I think it's worth discussing, but I would say that that's a job I certainly wouldn't want.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And I'm a lawyer, and I've dealt with literally hundreds of cases. I think we expect an awful lot from 9 people. That's the best way to put it. And indeed, we take the most difficult and challenging issues, and we place those issues before them. And their job is to follow the law the best they can, the laws that I'm helping create. And when I look at what we do in Congress, I am sometimes amazed that the Supreme Court can make heads or tails out of what we do. Some of their cases, some of their decisions recently, have said to the agencies and the bureaucracies, you are drifting away from what Congress has told you to do. And they've told these agencies to stop making up laws and go back to what it was Congress said. That the Supreme Court is thus telling Congress to do a better job in writing the laws. That's what they're really saying. But do I think the court should change numbers? No. I think 9 is the proper number. It's been that way a long time, and I think it should stay that way. Do I think the appointment process should be different? No. It's as good as it's going to get. I think the challenge for everybody is to figure out how to perhaps address some of the issues they face more aggressively in Congress, and it's hard, and that's why you see the slowness of adopting laws that are clearly addressing some of the issues the court's then stuck with. So the answer isn't to blame the court as much.
Right.
It's to look back at Congress and say, and the president, and say,
Right.
what are you people doing to aggressively define and answer these really tough questions? Because it should be the Congress. It's us, you and me.
Right.
We're Congress. All the
Right.
people of the Congress. You got to face these tough issues, and it's hard.
Yeah.
That's why I'm so happy to be here with you today, talking about these issues, because that's how you try to move forward.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure you get emails from critics, people saying whatever it is they say. You know, what are some of those themes that you hear? What are they, and how would you respond to those? What are? I mean, this is an opportunity for you to speak to some of them.
So, I'm a Republican, and so I was elected as a Republican, and I'm going to be doing the Republican thing. So those who are not Republicans can be angry, and they are, at me if they like, but that means they need to go elect a Democrat or an independent, somebody other than me, because my job is to represent as best I can my party and my country, and of course that includes everybody within the district. But I'm a Republican, so there you go. I'll do my best, and I do my best to listen to people on the other side of the aisle, and try to take into account their thinking. But at the end of the day, I'm a Republican.
Right.
So, and I'm proud of it. I'm not ashamed of it one bit. I think we have it right, and otherwise I wouldn't be a Republican. The challenge in some cases is to say to people on some of the more difficult issues, and there's a lot of them, then you need to elect somebody else. And that's as good as it's going to get. I reach out as much as anybody does in Congress, I think, to the other side, mainly because I realize if I don't have their support, whatever I'm doing is not going to get across the floor and have any chance in the Senate. So on certain issues that I'm working on with Bruce Westerman, the chair of Natural Resources, on getting back into the forest, we know it's so important that we get into the woods and start removing a lot of the overburden of fuel. We have to have Democrat help. We have to have it.
Yeah.
And so we go in and we adjust and we say, well, we'll do this, we'll do that, because at the end of the day, we can't just sit here and yell at each other. We've got to somehow get back into the woods. The issue is the same in some cases for water, and that's why I had my first field hearing in Fresno, California, and they had literally 5.5 feet of water content across the entire face of the Sierra. 5.5 feet of water.
Wow. About
to come zooming down when we had the hearing, and now it has zoomed down, and we wanted to capture as much of that water as we could. And I saw even a gentleman I disagree with a lot, the governor of California, saying, yes, we need to capture more of this water, and actually setting aside some of the environmental barriers to storing more water in aquifers. And so we saw people coming together in situations like that. So what I would say to people that disagree with me, stop the yelling and give me a good idea. Make sure it fits. And let's talk about immigration for a moment. You know what the first thing is that people say to me when I go to most of my meetings around here?
No.
We can't find anybody to work. We can't find anybody to work. And so where are they? Now, we raised the work requirement when we passed the debt ceiling, the work requirement in getting SNAP benefits from 49 I think to 53. So if you're going to get those benefits and you're 53 or younger, you have to be working if you fit the categories of capability. It's my hope that those kinds of things we'll be able to do better at. On the immigration side of things, is that the proper solution to finding people to work? Maybe partially, if we can do it properly where people can come and then go back. But this requires Democrat help. They can't be coming in and asking for everything in the world on the immigration side, because it sure isn't going to go through my side of the aisle.
Yeah.
So it requires some sort of coming together. And by the way, that's a super important issue for purposes of future funding of all of our safety net systems.
Yeah. So one last thing, and that is your staff, though, that you have, if anybody in the state of Oregon, particularly this area, if they're having trouble with some government snag, they can reach out to your staff, right?
Oh, absolutely, and they should. Federal government.
Federal government, yeah. So talk about that a little bit, the benefits that they might not know that they have.
Right, so my staff is, I can hire up to 19 people with the money that the taxpayers give our office. We don't have that many people hired now, but we have, I think, 16. And of that, about half are here in Oregon and the other half in Washington, D.C. And those people are there to serve the citizens of the 2nd Congressional District. And the type of things they can do are taxes. We hear people frustrated with the IRS, and they should be. We'll call our office, and we'll be able, we have some people who can help in that space, direct people to what they need help on. Any veteran that has difficulties, for goodness sake, call our office. And we have wonderful people that work for me that will try to help veterans. Social Security, if you're having a Social Security issue, let us know.
Right.
Visa and passport and other issues of trying to travel to other countries. If you run into difficulties, call our office. If you travel to Washington, D.C. and you're trying to see how our government works, call our office, and we'll do our best to try to help you out. Difficulties with any government agency, whether it's the Bureau of Land Management, the Forest Service, or any federal agency, call our office. That's what we're there for.
Yeah.
And so we've done hundreds of cases, and most of them successfully, some not, but most. Just call and go online. We have Cliff Bentz, Congressman. Go to our webpage, and it has a long list of all the stuff people can ask our office to help them with.
So you're kind of a customer service agency for the federal government, and to serve the people here in this district.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and I get a report every week on what happened that week and how many cases we resolved. We also have a newsletter that has all this information in it if people want to subscribe to it or ask us to send it. It's electronic.
Yeah.
And so it's been very well received. I think we have 40,000 people now that and just yesterday at one of our events, people were coming up and saying how much they like the newsletter. We try to keep it short and to the point, and it kind of shows what I've been doing for the week. It shows most of the, not most, but many of the important votes. I have a vote explanation there.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Well, Cliff, thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I put on a nice shirt because I knew you'd be wearing a tie. Yeah.
Well, you're very, more of the sneakers.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks, and anytime you're available, we'd love to see you. So.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you, Eastern Oregon, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.